And good morning, good afternoon, good day. We are live with BizWiz with Jake and Kyle. My name is Kyle. I am coming to you from Austin, Texas. And Jake, where are you at today?
Good afternoon, everyone. My name is Jake. I'm the founder and CEO of Amplify, and I'm here in Greater New York.
All right, sounds good. I'm here in Austin, Texas. I'm with FranNet. I work as a franchise consultant and a business broker. And today we're going to talk about small business topics. We're going to focus on where the wealth is built. How are you going to make money in business? Before I get into that, I was during our last episode. It sounded like you had a challenging week. How's your week going this week? Is it better?
Every week is a challenge. So, Kyle comes from more of a small business space and franchise. I am part of a fintech startup and come from a space more of a entrepreneurship, trying to raise money, trying to build a fintech platform. It's been kind of a roller coaster, Kyle. But we have been invited to pitch with some angel groups in the coming weeks, and we're trying to get in front of a few more angel groups. So we've had some positive steps forward, but technically with development, I think like with a house, right? When someone builds a house, everything comes together like really quick, and you start to
Yeah.
get used to this idea that your house is going to be built really quick. And when it gets to the finer points, such as painting and plastering, everything takes much longer. And that's kind of where we are with our technical development. So we're trying to keep our eye on the prize and push through.
Sounds good. Um, yeah, I imagine a lot of that has to do with a minimum viable product. Is that something that you're dealing with right now?
We have an MVP quote tool, and we're also building kind of like a three-part system. So we're also building an instant decisioning system so that when customers complete an online application, we can assess their credit very quickly and also get back to them with what they need to move forward to buy equipment, because the industry standard at the moment is just filled with friction. It takes a lot of time. There's paperwork that flies back and forth. It's really insecure. People kind of email things around. Your social security number is kind of flying all over the place, and we want to kind of create a portal that's easier for people to submit into and try to make their life easier.
That sounds good. Well, I can certainly understand the pain there. I just got an email this morning. I work with a lot of clients who are trying to secure funding of some sort for their businesses. And I got an email this morning that was kind of a good news email from one of my lending partners who said that one of my clients just got their SBA loan. Where are we at now? Is this we're March of 22, and this guy started doing that process in the summer of 21, and that's a lot of friction. There's plenty of opportunity to grease the skids on getting funding of all types, I'm sure. And so I'm glad to see
So
that
I,
you're
I
working.
think that's a longer process than most, right? I mean, you must work with a lot of people that do SBA loans, and that seems
Do.
it is a long process, but that seems also on the longer side.
It is on the longer side, and I think that that's the reality of the current SBA lending situation. I've had two, no, three clients in the past 6 months that have taken 6 months to get a loan, a small loan. We're not talking big, we're talking less than a quarter million. So um, it's it's still, and the SBA has an express lending program supposed to fast track it for 150 grand or less, but it's still taking a long time. And I think it's just because there's so much demand for lending capital.
But that's enough, right? If someone's getting a lend from the SBA for around a quarter mil, that's enough to, with the right franchise, get started.
Absolutely, that's plenty. In fact, there's this kind of a sweet spot of investment. I think kind of between a total capital project cost of being between 100 grand and 350 is kind of that sweet spot where you can get a unit up and running with that kind of capital. Now, if you put in about a third of it and then borrow the rest, borrow two-thirds, that's feasible. And I see several people doing that.
Now, it's not a small amount of money, but it's not a big amount of money either for someone who's interested to go out and start a business.
Yeah, I mean, it's well, you think about it. I mean, I'm kind of curious how that compares with the size of capital you're trying to raise. I'm sure it's smaller in franchising than it is what you're doing. But yes, that's it. And consider that people who are doing this in franchising, they're often bootstrapping. So if you got to come up with 100 grand, that's still a lot of money, right?
Absolutely.
Yeah. So it does take some money to make money.
It's hard because it's a slippery slope, and there's people in kind of this venture capital space that really you're looking to buy, you're listening to raise less than $1 million, and they're not even interested. There's
Yeah.
people out there that are trying to raise 40 million, and they've got an audience of people that want to do that. But in the small business space, yeah, $100,000 is not a small amount of money. We're actually looking to raise more around 500,000 from angel networks,
Hmm.
the angel network space. And, we're getting some interest in some people that are behind us and want to see us succeed. And that's the right kind of space to be.
Yeah. Well, then that sounds about right. From what I've learned about angel funding, it's in the, 500,000 to 2 million space, for seed round. And then you try to go for an A round and beyond to start getting into the multi-million for venture capital. Is that kind of where the
That's
trajectory you're
that's
going?
that's where we'd like to go, but you'll never know what happens next. There's one company I'm thinking of that raised. There's a lot of money out there in the space at the moment. There's a lot of change. I think there's a lot of change in the world in general at the moment, but there's a lot of change with technology and automation. And there was a company last year that raised 3 million in March and 13 million in September, October. So things are moving at a fast pace, and yeah, we would love to track in that direction, but we're early stage, so we'll see how it goes.
Yeah. We're talking about raising money, but ultimately, the end goal is to not only, solve a market problem, but create some wealth in the process. And that's what I wanted to talk about today. I'm kind of curious, the end game, where do you, where's the wealth built in your company and companies like yours?
Well, so our strategy is to try to use automation and a platform to help make the human experience better, right? Both from the customer standpoint, but also internally. So
Hmm.
if you have a room full of people that are doing something an old way, they're getting documents in, they're reviewing those documents, they're placing those documents somewhere else for someone else to review. And the technology exists to speed up that process now, to help facilitate getting documents in, to assess them, to identify what they are. And so we're really just trying to take some existing technologies and apply them to a specific space. And by doing that, you should be able to reduce, by doing things faster, you're also reducing costs. If something typically takes you 10 hours one week and you can reduce that to 5 hours, you've got 5 hours that you could be doing something else. Um, and that therefore reduces a cost. So we're hoping to use technology to reduce costs and improve customer experience. And by doing that, the hope would be to scale.
Okay. So when you're pitching to angel investors and VC, I'm sure part of the value proposition has to be, well, how are they going to make money? So how do you answer that question?
That is a good question, and we're still we're still learning. I think there's so many questions along the way. I think my strategy at the moment where I've come to, Kyle, is that I want to have a pitch and a pitch deck that answers all the obvious questions. So that when I get to the end of the pitch, people are asking me good questions about investing and not asking questions that should be obvious. If someone's
Mhm.
trying to poke a hole in your presentation or they see an obvious gap, then they're talking about something that takes them away from actually talking about investing in you. If they don't understand very clearly, what's your marketplace? How is this problem help? Who's your competition? And they start asking like, well, isn't there another competitor that does that? You're distracting the conversation away from where you want it to be.
Mhm.
So your pitch should really answer all those really obvious questions so that when you're done with it, you get into questions more about the numbers and scaling. And yes, so people have to be inspired to see that we have a project that is workable, that has users and is scalable. And if it is scalable, theoretically, they should be able to get a return on their investment.
Okay. So the wealth really is built by that multiple of return that they are expecting from the strength of your business plan to be able to penetrate that market and gain customers to solve that compelling pain about equipment financing. Is that kind of, am I hearing that correctly?
Yeah, I think you're pretty much right on, right? We're taking a process that takes a lot of humans and they all need to be paid. They all take time. Sometimes they're inconsistent. We're putting in an automated technical process that still needs a human touch, right? People after coronavirus, people are more interested in having a fully digital experience than they were before coronavirus. People are more interested to do their banking in a fully digital experience. But we still do need a human touch there. So we're not looking to replace the humans, We just want to take down some of that really redundant work they're doing so they can focus on customers and customer service rather than reviewing documents. And through that, we should make a more efficient process that's more scalable.
Okay. So sounds like a compelling wealth generation message for your investors. What about you? How do you want to make wealth for yourself in this business?
That's a good question. I mean, it's such a long road, and I'll tell you something that investors don't want to see. They don't want to see that they're investing in an idea,
Mm-hmm.
and so they want to invest in something that they see is scalable. But they also don't want to invest in someone. And every once in a while, you'll see someone on Shark Tank or Dragon's Den who asks for the investment. And they're like, "Hey, what are you going to do with the investment?" And they're like, "Well, I'm going to pay myself. I want you to pay me so I can take a salary so I can go do this thing." And typically investors don't want to see that. They don't want to pay you. They want to buy a business, And so my reward is really something over the longer term by building a viable business and something that's really scalable. There's no short-term wealth building in this space. But you would hope that by building the company and scaling, even if there's not an income coming in the short term, that you're building something that as it scales and as it goes out to more people, has a lot of value and grows bigger.
So wealth building, it sounds like, is going to be a long game for you.
I'm in this for the longer game, whereas the investors, they want to see a return over 3 to 5 years. They want to see a bigger player come in and kind of take them out, or a business that's going to exit and get bought out, and they want a kind of a 3 to 5 year return. But it's a little out of my space to expound on why the investors are getting involved.
So let me connect the dots here, and bear with me. I'm kind of I'm a little dense here, so maybe you can explain it to me easily. If they want a 3 to 5 year exit, and when they get in, you're going to present some sort of term sheet for investment. And I imagine that they're going to own certain shares in the company, right, on this term sheet. And maybe you are too, and maybe some of your co-founders, right, or principals in the company. And if they exit after 3 to 5 years at some sort of valuation, don't you get also that same valuation for your percentage share of ownership?
You are asking a really difficult question because there's a really famous video that I would refer you to that is too much for me to try to explain right here, right? And that is about the diminishing slice of pie. So when you have 30% of a company and other people invest in it, that 30% becomes a lesser amount. And so the more investment you take on, you get a lesser percent of something, but you get a lesser percent of something bigger, and you actually get more. So it is a complicated proposition.
Yes. And I think I understand what you mean when you've got all that capital coming in. That means that what they call post-cash valuation is actually much larger, and they take a percentage share of ownership, which means you get kind of squeezed out a little bit, but the whole pie is bigger. So your section gets bigger too. Is it?
Well, your section gets smaller, but it's a smaller piece of something larger. Obviously, with all that investment, theoretically, you're hiring salespeople, you're doing marketing, you're taking over, share of the market space, you're getting more users. And so, yes, your share actually gets smaller, but then more valuable, theoretically.
Smaller as a percentage of the whole, but more valuable in absolute terms.
Yes, that pie is then a bigger pie, right? The pie actually grows this way.
Yes. And so that's how you're creating wealth. You said you had some folks that are working in exchange for equity, and that's their hope, is that equity will be worth more in absolute terms than what it is now.
Yes.
All right.
Absolutely. And what about on your side? So what do you consider as wealth generation, and what do you recommend for some of the people that come into your fray?
Well, wealth generation in the franchise model is a good bit simpler, and consider that somebody who owns the business, who's starting this franchise, they're probably bootstrapping with their own cash and maybe borrowing some money, but there aren't any outside investors per se. So this is really like an active investment, kind of like, an asset in a way. And so there's three main ways that you make money when you're running a small business like that. One is that you're probably paying yourself a nominal wage, right? And two is you're taking profits out of the business itself because you're the owner, right? So anything that's net income drops to the bottom line, that's yours. And then 3, when you decide to sell the business, there is a valuation. A business is an asset that is worth something that can be valued and be sold to another party. And that is actually a significant event where wealth is generated. But you've got these 3 streams where wealth is created when you're running a small business.
Now, are a lot of people getting into franchise for kind of an exit, or are most of them getting into it for that more ongoing revenue generation?
Well, it's kind of spread between 3 scenarios. One is somebody wants to grow it big and then sell it, right? So they're beginning with the end in mind. Second is they want to grow it big and hire a manager to run it, maybe work in it part-time and have something to do as a retirement strategy and keep that income stream. All right. So there's that. And third, some people, they want to build a legacy for their family and maybe groom a child to take it over eventually. And so I'd say that it's probably equally split between all of those.
Do you have any kind of a view to people, doing intergenerational kind of franchising? Does that often work out, or is it difficult transition as it goes from a father to a child?
Yeah, I've seen people do that, and it hasn't been that big of a deal. I think that, for those who do not, want to groom a child, they know that that child has no interest in the beginning. So, and that's part of what I do with our process is ask them about that. Do you have children that might be interested in taking over eventually? And it's usually a yes or no, question or answer there. But of the people that I said, yes, definitely, they have, I've got 2 examples of somebody who started a business, put a child in there as maybe like the front desk person or a general manager. And that person is actually gaining practical experience on how to run that business day to day. So that's the grooming part is they're getting on the job training, and over a period of years, they're ready to take it over as the owner,
And do people come to you specifically for strategies around, I guess, not only with their own children, but around like leadership transitions?
Um, Not really with the leadership transition. Uh, for the ones that aren't grooming a child to take over or aren't just building to sell, but the ones who are actually going to grow a business and have managers in place, the leadership transition is kind of important there. But that's something that they can count on a franchisor to help them with. The franchisor will actually have some frameworks for here's the type of people you should hire. Here's how you can incentivize them. Here's how you can create this, alignment of goals to make sure that they are working to make the business better and will benefit from that. So that's what they can count on with the franchisor.
Nice.
Yeah. But, one of the things that I do when I'm helping people with that is look to see the difference between how is the wealth built in a franchise versus an independent business versus having a job, right? And to the extent that I can clarify that, that enables them to sort of see the light and see that, oh, okay, franchising is actually pretty good, because if you compare it, let's say you're making 150 grand a year in a job, you don't own anything, you're in a really high tax bracket, it's when you lose that job, you just walk away. There's no asset, right? You're just trading time for money. Now, let's say you start an independent business and it has 150 grand a year cash flow eventually. You're probably not paying yourself 150 grand W-2 wage. So you're in a lower tax bracket. You've got some sheltered income there, right? We know the corporate tax rates are a little bit lower, right? So you've got a significant chunk that's being taxed at a lower rate. Plus, you might be living through the business.
That's
Now,
really interesting.
when it's time to sell it, the valuations are probably going to be a little bit lower than they are for a franchise of an equal size, right? And it's not as easy to get an SBA loan for the buyer. So that's often owner financing comes into play, where the owner has to take part of the payment and then receive the rest over a period of time from the cash flow streams as the new owner operates the business. And the old owner is on the hook to train the new owner how to do it. Now, if we compare that scenario to the franchise, you have higher valuations, you have SBA lending, so you get all the cash up front, and the franchisor trains the new owner. So it's literally taking more money or walking away sooner. And that's the thing that I try to impart to my client base, that owning a business like that is, in the long game, much more capable of generating wealth than just trying to go find a job that pays well.
Is there a particular strategy that you recommend to people, or it just depends on their personality and what their goals are?
Whether to get into business or not.
Whether to get into business to sell, or to have for many years, or to just have an income.
Yeah, there is. For people who are building to sell, I tend to show them concepts that either have a significant amount of assets, or that the industry valuation multiple, and I know that's a technical term, but that's the means by which the business is actually ascribed to value, where the valuation multiples are higher. So like light manufacturing is a really good case. You've got big equipment, you've got this office industrial space, you've got high valuation multiples, and you can groom people to basically systematize both operations and sales. And so it becomes an asset that runs, without too much owner interference. That is pretty attractive. So if people are in that end game, I tend to show them businesses that are going to help them maximize their returns on that end game.
What are the challenges for franchisees as the economy kind of turns a bit? Are there franchises that are more popular when the economy is strong versus because you've been doing this for a very long time, right? Are there franchises that are more popular when the economy is facing more challenges?
Yeah, the ones that have that rely more on revenue streams from a customer's discretionary income tend to be more popular in good times.
What's an example? What would that be?
The like mobile gaming trucks.
Right.
Have you ever seen those?
Which is a very cool idea. That's a great concept.
Yeah, and I'm not picking on any particular industry, but I'm just picking one out of the blue.
That's a little bit more discretionary. So that's better at the high times.
Yeah, you pull up in front of somebody's house, all your 12-year-old friends pile in, and you go gaming in the back of this truck, and it's kind of fun, right? But that is totally discretionary, right? Nobody really needs that. But when times are good, man, those businesses pop. When times are bad, we tend to retrench as consumers into the stuff that we really need. Okay. So like during the pandemic, home consumer services were through the roof, and they still are, right? Your residential cleaning, mosquito spraying, repairing the roofs, fixing the AC, that kind of stuff. It just needs to be done. And so those tend to be better in more difficult times, because there are certain expenses that we're not going to forgo, And I think if there was one that was durable, good times and bad, no matter what, it's disaster restoration. When you have a plumbing break or a fire, smoke, mold damage, there's insurance money out there to pay for that. And nobody's going to sit around and say, oh, I can't get this. I got to wait to get this fixed. It's an emergency, right? And it needs to be fixed. It's expensive. There's insurance money that's going to pay for it. And there's statistics that show that this type of thing just happens all the time. We have 10 fires a day in my county. So it's out there. It's money waiting to be picked up.
Do you have any franchises based around like flood protection?
Flood remediation.
Yeah.
Yes, definitely. And they tend to be high margin businesses.
Nice one.
Yeah. In fact, I would say that amongst all the businesses I work with, that disaster restoration is one of those where you can have a modest investment and an extremely high return. Now, this is not one of those businesses that you build to sell, though. This is where you're building your wealth is in the high profit, more so than it is in the actual sale of the business in the end.
So when you talk about wealth generation in the franchise space, at what point, what do you recommend people do as they start to generate some capital? Is it better to put it back into the business to expand into another franchise, or do you recommend that they, start creating a savings, or simply, move into? I guess the goal is for some people to have a lifestyle business, right? Like you have a business that you work part of the time that you get an income from, and you can go live a good life from.
Yeah. And that's a really good question. That's something that I like to ask up front is, What's the goal for this? And everyone's got their different goals. Some people want a lifestyle business. Some people are just busybodies and need something to do all day long, right? And some people are trying to build an empire that they can sell or pass on to a child.
And so you start to identify those people up front. You know, this person wants to have like a revenue stream. This person really wants to build an empire. This person is trying to build franchises that they can pass on to their family.
Yeah, that's absolutely right. So, you know, I give an example. I had one client that really just wanted to be involved in the community. Money was not an issue. That client did not care that much about, you know, the income that was generated. That person already had a successful business on the side generating income. It was no big deal. They wanted something to do that was meaningful to them. Okay. And that contrasts with another client that I've been working with recently, who's a corporate executive, wants to stay in that job, but run this business on the side and build it up over time to create an income stream that that person can step into once they decide to quit that job. That makes the transition easy. So everyone's in it for different reasons, and it's really important to lay those reasons on the table and fully understand them. And that way we can find the right business that gets to the goal.
Yeah. Interesting. And so that's mostly around franchise, because people could also just be considering to start their own business, right?
Yeah, absolutely. You know, I tell folks, if you have a strong need to do things your very own way, or you're very passionate about something, and or you need to let your own freak flag fly, well, maybe going into independent business is going to be the right way for you. And then that starts to slip into, do you bootstrap it yourself, or do you go like the route that you're doing and raise money? I mean, you're trying to do a really big thing, you know, and so it's created out of passion and experience that you've had. And that's a big goal. And there are other folks who, you know, just want to do their own thing and not grow too big. And in that case, I do recommend that people don't go the franchise route, but they ought to do something else. And quite frankly, there are certain folks that shouldn't be running a business at all.
Yeah. You run across plenty of those as well. How many people
Yeah,
come
you
through
know,
with a concept they want to turn into a franchise? You know,
I
maybe
get
they
that.
run a business that was a, you know, a good restaurant, or they have a flood remediation business.
Yeah,
How does
you know,
someone convert that into a franchise?
they could. There's a few steps. And the first step is really to build an operations manual for your business and get really detailed about how it works. And then give that operations manual to a trusted lieutenant to open up a second location and see how that goes. See how that goes. Make all the mistakes, figure out where to tweak it. And if you can get somebody with limited experience who's not an owner to successfully run another corporate owned store, you might be ready for franchising. And at that point, you want to develop a franchise disclosure document and retain a franchise development company to start marketing it to other owners across the country.
So a lot of that is like a trainability, like kind of a self-sustained trainability with your business model.
Absolutely. That's a core value proposition of franchising, is that you can walk into this business without industry experience, get trained, have an operations manual, and be able to execute on that manual and do well. Yeah.
Well, listeners, we are BizWiz. We are a weekly podcast here to talk about all things business, entrepreneurship, fintech, startup, and motivation. And as we are getting to the end of our kind of 30-minute time period, if there's anyone out there with a question, we do love to take questions. We do appreciate your upvotes, if anyone would be so kind. But any questions before we go? And Kyle, anything else that you wanted to cover off before we end the day? Your topic for the day was really wealth generation and how to do that with a small business.
Yeah. Well, you know, I like to cover one topic at a time. I appreciate getting a better understanding of how you're trying to create wealth, both for yourself and your co-founders and your investors, and the opportunity to talk about how one builds wealth if they're bootstrapping in a franchise model. And we're out here on LinkedIn, YouTube, and Reddit RPAN every Wednesday at 11 a.m. Central, noon Eastern. Always a pleasure talking with you, Jake. We've got a new topic every week, and we encourage people to show up and listen, and we'll keep it fresh every time. Jake, I think we're going to be doing it an hour later next week. Is that right?
Next week will be an hour later. We usually try to hit 12 o'clock EST, and as Kyle pointed out, 11 CST, but we're going to do a session next week 1 hour later at 1 p.m. EST before returning to our usual time. And we are just exploring, the Reddit space. There's a lot of Reddit business subreddits, our entrepreneur, our startup, our entrepreneur ride along. And we're hoping to tap into that space in Reddit and find people who want to talk about business and get involved discussing it with us.
Absolutely. And I appreciate all the viewers on LinkedIn as well. I see a dozen of them out there, and we appreciate your attention. We hope it's, relevant and entertaining and informative for you. And we look forward to seeing you next week.
Thank you, everyone, for listening to us, and hope you have a great week. We'll speak to you again soon.
Good to see you, Jake. Take care.